Greetings, everyone. Thank you all for joining in. With immense pleasure, I welcome each one of you to SEDS KCT Space Talk 10 on robotics in space sector. Now, I would like to welcome our honorable speaker, Mr. Divya Prakash Mishra. Mr. Divya Prakash Mishra is working as a space robotics and control engineer at Agnikul Cosmos. He works in guidance, navigation, and control systems for space launch vehicle. I now welcome you, sir, on behalf of SEDS KCT with gratitude and request you to share your valuable insights with all of us. Sir, now kindly take up the session forward. Thank you.
So thank you. So today I'll be talking about robotics in space sector. So as you can see, there is this rocket in the screen. It is Agniban, which Agnikul Cosmos, in Agnikul Cosmos we are making. It is a two-stage rocket capable of taking 100 kg payload to lower Earth orbit. So seeing you guys, it reminds me of my BTech in 2012 to 2016, when me and my roommate were thriving to attend this kind of talks to gain some knowledge. And we all are same, like everybody starts same. Even I was also there in the audience, and I believe every scientist and engineer, they are in the audience before they become something. So I would like to first tell that we should feel lucky that we are studying engineering. So engineering is tough. It is tough among many other courses, and we should feel lucky uh, to study engineering. And there might have been some aspirations of you to go to some better place, to better colleges, institute to and for engineering. But I think that doesn't matter. Now that you have entered engineering, you should feel proud that you are studying engineering, because engineers, as you all know, are problem solvers. Just imagine in primitive era, like when there was nothing, the human made hunting tools. That was kind of like first engineering. Nobody knew that that was engineering, but it was one of the first instances of engineering. Use of fire, invention of wheel, which has brought the human race to the era which we see now. You have the laptop, the internet you are using, the mobile phones, the buildings you are sitting, the sofa, chairs, whatever. Look how far we have come. And though that was only possible because there were engineers throughout the time. We are taking the human race ahead. So we should feel proud of that, that we have the opportunity to study engineering, so that we will make lives more easier, more comfortable in times to come. And engineering isn't directly science, it's a branch of science where you talk about applications. When you talk about science, it is all about discoveries. You imagine something, you put it on paper, but the feasibility from the paper to the real world, the practicality of implementation, how this theory, how this mathematics is going to help you take the human race ahead, or making it comfortable, convenient, save lives. So that what engineers have been doing. So when there in during 1940s 50s, when there was this industry booming, and steam, there was steam engine, there was invention of batteries. So those were kind of like inventions in the respective field. Means only one field was involved. So that was making manufacturing faster. It was taking human race ahead, no doubt about it. But then few inventor, they started thinking about something more intuitive, which could help uh, human. a little more than just manufacturing. And that's where the autonomy and robotics comes in. Initially, in during 1950s, they were called automata. When even Edison made his robot, a talking robot for himself, when he was working with DC electricity. So why, how come robotics become more important and more cooler? First of all, robotics came when it was thought of like, instead of humans, why shouldn't we use machines wherever suppose a task which is life threatening, which takes more effort and time, we should use machines there instead of humans, so that it will save time and effort, and we can, without endangering human lives, we can get the job done. There were industry, then automation came, where there was a uh, chance of error. We used machine there. So in all this field, robotics came into picture. So when we say robotics, it is fascinating when we go to engineering, and when we uh, excuse me just a second, please. Sorry for that. Yeah, so it is more cooler. Why is it cooler? Because when we are studying engineering, you are only studying about one respective field. Suppose you are an electrical engineer or an electronics engineer, you study about electronics, you study application of the same field. When you are electrical engineer, you make machines, you only study about the electrical part of it. The electrical application is a motor or a generator. But robotics is more interdisciplinary. When it comes to robotics, everything, electrical, mechanical, electronics, computer science, all has to work simultaneously and perfectly for robot to work. So that's what makes it cool. So there is robotics and there is autonomy. So both are a little different thing. When robotics came, the coinage of robotics was done through a literature, where it was treated as they will be the human faithful servant. So robots were considered faithful servants of human beings. There are laws. So autonomy is like it is meant to do a single task, or with no human intervention at all. Suppose a automatic door, you stand before it and it just opens. You don't have any uh, intervention in the task. But robotics have a very little, at least, a human intervention. You'll have to speak to robot at least for getting a job done. Or you, in manual robotics, for example, you'll have a much amount of human intervention is required. So that's where autonomy and robotics differ. So as I said, we have always been friends with robotics. Robotics is a stream which is taught in master degree, but uh, you should feel that it is there, or it has always been there, because it is the same concept of engineering. Suppose you are studying about motors in electrical engineering, or in digital signal processing in electronics. Just trust that that is going to, somewhere down the line, you are going to, suppose you are fascinated about robotics, that will be implemented. So we have always been friends with robotics, just we don't know. So let's just trust in the basic principle what we are studying in the engineering, and let's apply to make robots and make life easier and convenient. So there is mobile robotics, where there are movable parts, and the robot itself moves or partially moves. So in mobile robotics, as I said, there are two separate categories: manual robotics and autonomous robotics. Manual robotics needs a human to control through a radio controller, you give commands through the controller, uh, uh, and the robot works accordingly. In autonomous robotics, a very minimal human intervention is required. You just speak to robot and it will get the job done. And moreover, the robot uh, can do some few basic tasks without even speaking. Like now you are seeing the picture in front of us. It is some of may you may recognize as well. This is a robot dog. So this robot dog can do some tasks like fetch you a drink, and we'll soon see the video of it. So I want to show you all. You might have seen this video before, but still, since we are in the topic, I would like to show you this video of the this robot dog. So I hope you all enjoyed the video. So this was about the robotic dog Spot. So as that engineer said, it can function. It can do some basic task without any human intervention, that like walking, like balancing in itself in different terrains. It is climbing the stairs without any human intervention. But for few tasks you will have to give some commands, like this. It can map the area for you for itself, also to study the arena or the elevation, the ground, the terrain, to walk through it. You can ask it to fetch a drink or something. So this is how robotics is progressing. So when we talk about the advancement in robotics, the modern day advancements are artificial intelligence. So this robot has artificial intelligence implemented as well. So when the guy said spot, the robot responded to it. So that is a kind of artificial intelligence. When he said artificial, so when the robots are made, they are the decision makings are left to human beings for a little intervention. So like they are not intelligent enough when you require a drink to understand and fetch you a drink, whether it is your tea time, lunch time, whatever. Some decision making is left to humans to command them. As I said, they are treated, they are meant to be treated as servant. So now in the modern era, we are giving them some decision making skills, which is an intelligence which only human are able to do it. So that's where robotics is progressing. So what if robotic progresses? Like you are all familiar with the autopilot in cars nowadays. So what if robotics progresses and cars have artificial intelligence, and this happens? So so this is a funny picture here where the car is looking at the phone when it is in autopilot, and even the driver is looking at its phone. So the two engineers are studying the failure case of car, and they think that what if car is looking at the phone as well. So as I said, robotics is not complex. It is cooler because it involves all the engineering, multiple things. It's not at all complex. So when I was in engineering, I was also introduced to robotics in a very basic fashion. There was a robotics club like the club you have SCDS in your college. There was a robotics club. I joined it. So let me tell you what was my first glance or my first introduction to robotics was. So I hope you all know this small robot called line follower robot. Those who don't know, I just will give you a brief introduction to it. A line follower robot is there is a arena, usually in dark in color, and there is a pathway made with a lighter color. There is a track on which the robot will follow the track and finish the race. The competition, usually there are competitions, and competition is about who reaches the uh, end point, the destination at very less time without skipping the track. So there is basically a track, and the robot has to follow until the end point, uh, following the track. So so I also was uh, participating in that competition. Me and my roommate, we were making this line follower robot. It's a very basic robot, and uh, it I will show you what it has. As you can see from the bot itself, it has just wheel, a a chassis, and two wheels, a chassis, and one sensor. So that sensor which you look in front of it is a IR sensor, infrared sensor. So what it does is, uh, there are two, you can see two diode, light emitting diode kind of thing in front of the sensor. One is white and one is black. The white light emitting diode is radiating infrared to the tracks, and the black was is meant to receive it. So when the light is emitted from the sensor and it hits a brighter surface, it gets reflected, and the black one here, which absorbs infrared radiation, absorbs and detects and generate a voltage in the sensor, which says that this is a bright surface. So since the entire arena will be made of a darker surface, mostly black, and the track is usually made of a brighter surface, which is white. So this sensor will tell you the if a voltage is generated, if a infrared radiation is radiated and the sensor receives the reflection of it and generates a voltage, that will tell you that the sensor is on the track. But if you are missing it, somehow you will go to the entire black arena and you will not be on the track, because the sensor will not be generating any voltage, because it will not be receiving any infrared signal. So this sensor takes that into account. Then there is a microcontroller. We did our with an Arduino board, where we programmed that when the sensor takes the signal, how to act, whether the motor will, one side of the motor will slow down, one side of the motor will be faster, so that it can take a turn. So we coded the Arduino board, and there were this motor where this Arduino board, this is a microcontroller actually, this where this microcontroller will take signals from the IR sensor and command accordingly to the brushed DC motor. This is brushed DC motor, uh, which which you if there are some electrical students here as well, they might have studied in second year electrical machines. It's basic DC motor. It has, the way you have studied in your books, it has a splittering inside it. So we used that, which was connected to the wheels, and this microcontroller commanded according to the signal received from the IR sensor. So when I say it, when we were going to the competition, the basic program we used to use was this normal coding of some bunch of if else statement in the microcontroller, how it should behave when it is within the track, when it is outside of the track. So it was just if else statement. So what happened was we unfortunately bought one adapter which was more in power rating, more in voltage rating to power our bot. And we saw that the motor was very, very fast. The motor was very, very fast, so fast that before the signal, before the track is sensed by the IR sensor, and before the Arduino board, the microcontroller commands the motor, the speed is so high that because of inertia itself, the robot is off the track. So we were thinking, so now we cannot win a competition like this because our robot was fast enough. That's good, but it will never be on track if this is this fast enough, this much. So somehow we had to control or figure out a way to make this work. So then we were surfing internet and we found something very basic, the PID controller. I think control those who have learned control system or at least have introduction to robotics, they might be knowing what a PID controller is. So we saw the PID, the implementation of PID controllers. We were in second year, fourth semester, so control system was already a subject. We knew it was PID controller, but we didn't know how it was to be implemented, and this was something very basic. So a basic robot. So we implemented PID controller. We uh, didn't sleep all night, and we were tuning the PID gains for the for the for the controller to respond fast enough so that it can tackle the speed, so that it even the motor is fast, it can take the signal from IR sensor and perfectly implement the code. It can damp oscillations, it can settle down quickly. So we were tuning that controller and finally we could tune it, and the speed, which was a disadvantage for us, became an advantage because we implemented a PID controller. It's very, very basic control engineering when you go to control system. So we implemented that. So that's how it was. It was fascinating for me. We were normal engineering student. Me and my roommate both were fascinated with the fact that what we studied in the book, in the notes, we were doing some mathematical assignment about it, we wrote an exam about it, was implemented, and finally we were seeing the results after tuning the gains. So that's how it was fascinating for me. So basically in mobile robotics, there are three pillars in autonomous robotics, even in some manual robotics also, where a autopilot is there to assist you. So guidance, navigation, and control. So it is. So I'll just from this picture, I would like to introduce you what they are before going to kind of like engineering basics, application basics of it. So you can, as you can see in this picture, there is a boat, and there are three people rowing it, and one man who seems to be a leader, looking at some destination island. Suppose maybe some island he wants to go or they want to go through a telescope, and he is directing them. So now take the example of this man who is leading them. So this man looks at the telescope towards the destination island and sees that this is the this is the point we'll have to reach, and figure out a path how to go. So it will, he is the look at, he is pointing a finger and asking its crew to go through this path, or that is the place we need to reach. So this is what guidance does. Guidance of a mobile robot, what it does, it will tell you where to go, which path to take, how to take. So this is guidance. This is what the role of guidance is. Navigation. When we come to navigation, okay. Now they all are human beings, right? So they have okay brain. They can they can see and understand the direction of the boat, where it is heading. They can sense the velocity of the boat. They can sense whether the boat is tilting, so the sense of orientation of the boat. So basically navigation is defined as knowing the states of a vehicle. States are the velocity, the angle it is heading towards, the position right now. So the position right now, the tilting, this is meant by navigation, which will give you an idea where you are right now, what is your velocity, how you are heading. When it comes to controls, you see all these three men rowing and sweating. So when you know where to go and how to go, and when you know where you are and how you are, there is only one thing that is left to move, that is controlling it or moving ahead. So these three persons, when they are rowing, they are basically controlling. If they want, if they have a time limit, that this is by this time, we should, by sunset we should reach the destination, then they will row faster. If it is if the boat is starting to tilt because of rowing on one side, they will split the work and they will row on the other side. They will row on one side to tilt it left, they will row on the other side to tilt it right. So they are basically controlling it. So these were the three pillars here, which I saw in you in the picture. So before going ahead with the robotics, and let's talk about space and how robotics came into space. uh, let me first introduce you how we came to space. When we are said that human being are social, that's what makes us different from other animals. We are a social animals. But moreover, there is more to that. We are just not just social. We are curious. So when Galileo saw the space, it was not the social nature of Galileo which uh, brought astronomy to us. Rather, he was curious. So human are born curious. Galileo saw into the sky and he started predicting eclipses, and that's how we started dreaming of sometime going to the space and see for ourselves whether the earth is round, whether the sun is uh, this much sun is giving light to earth, the eclipse, the position of the moon. So we dreamed of the dream of going to space started like that. Before that, uh, then uh, then came flying in the air first, where the hot air balloon came, and then in Wright brothers invented the first aeroplane. Uh, when when it was about space and reaching higher altitude, rocket was going. The invention of rocket was way beyond and before we started making plane. Rocket was used as artillery, propelled artillery, first in the 10th century by Chinese. Then by 13th century, it was stopped. Even India made some progress in developing some rockets. It was used in war by Tipu Sultan of Mysore against British as well. So it was then just a solid rocket motor. Then Goddard came and made some liquid propellant engine, and then modern rocketry started with Goddard. So when it during the Second World War, you must have heard the name Anton von Braun. He took the Goddard's idea of liquid propellant engine and put it into his own rocket to reach very high altitude. Even he was a German inventor and scientist. So then, when Germany saw the invention of high altitude rockets, there was a Second World War going on. They started to use that as a missile. So the modern rockets we see today are form of missile. So they started with so they started making ballistic missile to bombard on England and some parts of Europe. So this is the rocket you see here is the first guided missile with a liquid propellant engine. It had guidance, navigation, and control, all three of them. It was a pre-guided missile where the longitude and latitude are fed into it. Then this rocket was launched, and that will fall into that longitude and latitude and bombard that place. So this is the first rocket, first modern rocket built with guidance, navigation, and control. This is called V2 rocket, which Germany made in World War II. Then after that, Russians and Americans took that model and that made the first basic design for the space venture of Russia and US. So now let's just talk a little basic about how guidance work there in rocket guidance. In guidance in rocket and ballistic missile, when I say ballistic missile, it's a basically a rocket which leaves the atmosphere, suborbital atmosphere around 100 kilometers or just above it, and it is propelled through a solid motor or a liquid motor, and then it's just the gravity which brings it down and put it and it falls on a place, and that area is bombarded. It is very similar to rocket, but it doesn't orbit around the earth completely. It is just meant to leave the atmosphere once to get altitude, and it is basically just like a projectile motion where half of the part you are propelling it with a liquid engine or a solid engine, and then it is falling. uh, so that is a ballistic missile. So in rockets and missiles, guidance is fed. It is predetermined what is the destination, and it is fed to the rocket what is the point they will have to reach in the orbit. So when it comes to missiles, guidance is a little more. Uh, it finds it application a little more in missiles. So there are two types of guidance: command guidance and homing guidance. So I think you people can see here. There is a radar station on the ground here, which has an antenna. You can see, and it has detected a target, which is a fighter aircraft, for example. And there is a missile launch pad here, just beside the radar. So the radar detected that aircraft target. It detected it and launched the missile. So what this radar is doing is it is tracking the target and simultaneously taking signals from the missiles where the missile is and guiding the rocket. So this radar station, this is a ground station along with radar. So that station is detecting the position of target, a velocity of target, and instructing the missile and deciding a point of intercept where the missile will hit the target. So that is command guidance. The ground station, this all happens automatically. This used to happen with a human intervention for tanks, but that too has become autonomous now. So this entire thing is automatic, and here the ground station is doing the job of tracking the target as well as instructing the missile. Let's come to homing guidance. So homing guidance is a little more more intuitive. When you question why should a radar take care of where the missile is going, why cannot the missile can do this basic thing himself? So that's what became homing guidance. So once the radar tracks, here you can see there is a target and there is a missile launched from a vessel, a naval vessel. It is shown in a sea. So the radar tracks the target and it just launches. And after a few seconds of the launch, the radar gets independent of the missile. It is not instructing the missile to go here and there. The missile itself takes over the command and decides a path to intercept the target. So, like previously in the command guidance, the ground station radar was instructing it. For the missile to understand where the target is and the target velocity, the missile has to have the sensors which can detect the position of the target. And I tell you, robotics is nothing without sensor. So the same radar which was in the ground, which was more powerful radar, that radar was implemented inside the missile itself to detect its own target. So you can see in the second picture here, where the nose cone of the missile has been taken out and it is made transparent. You can see a radar, small radar. It is not so much powerful, but enough to detect a target when it is 3-4 kilometers away. So it just how a basic idea on how radar works. It sends a radio frequency. It sends radio frequency, then it receives and detects the radio frequency getting reflected from different objects, and that's how it detects its target. You can see the picture, first picture also here. There is a DRDO missile called Nag. The nose head of this is made of infrared sensor. So there it is basically the guidance is homing guidance is basically usually implemented in these two ways, having a radar and having a infrared sensor in nose of the missile. So that was homing guidance and commanding guidance. Now let's come to navigation. So already I have given you a brief little introduction about the radar navigation, where radar sends the uh, radio frequency signal and it receives it, and radar can detect the positions and velocity as well. So that is also a basic form of navigation. So when navigation is implemented in space vehicles and missiles, there these are the usual basic one: inertial navigation system and global satellite navigation system. Global satellite navigation system you are more familiar with. uh, GPS is a form of global satellite navigation system, which is you have on phone. So first, let's talk about global satellite navigation system, and then we'll come to inertial navigation system. So, globe GNSS, or let's talk about GPS. GPS has 31 satellites orbiting around the Earth, in the middle of Earth orbit, and they have clocks. Those are called atomic clocks or hydrogen Mason clocks, which are very, very accurate. So those satellites and the user or a object or a missile or rocket or a user you itself, which is supposed to be detected, has a receiver on its hand. There is a image of receiver here as well. So you take the satellite. The satellite sends the signal, and along with that signal it sends the code in which the time when the satellite signal was sent is coded. Then the receiver on earth receives that signal and decodes it and finds the uh, coded message, where it receives most basically two things: the position of the satellite itself, the time at which the satellite sent the signal. So now you know the time at which the signal was sent, and the receiver itself knows when it itself received the radio signal. So once you know the location of the satellite and you have the time of both sending and receiving, once you divide the distance with divide the location, you basically get a uh, range where the receiver can be. So now the same thing multiple satellites do. They send their signals to the receiver, and receiver, from getting data from all these three, all the at least four satellites, it reaches to a position fix, that where that receiver is with respect to all those four satellites. The position of four satellites is very predictable and predetermined by a ground station which always sends signal to the receiver. So with that concept, it finds out the location. The receiver fixes the position. So basically, to fix the position, you need at least 3 satellite coverage, and for velocity, you need 4. So there are at least 8 satellites always over our head on a lucky, sunny or good day. So that was GPS for you, and you can now we'll go towards inertial navigation system. So inertial navigation system uses a sensor called IMU. It is called as inertial measurement unit. So what it contains is an IMU contains basically two sensors, an accelerometer and a gyroscope. Very basic sensor you are already familiar with. Your phone contains accelerometer and gyroscopes. So I will just give you a brief introduction what this accelerometer does. So there is a mass spring system inside it, where the spring, because of the mass, there is elongated uh, for a few at a few distance, that is, let's take x. When a force acts on the mass, it gets elongated or compressed. So the difference in the change in position, the delta x you see here, is the distance that the mass move, which is a function of force. Now once you get the force, because you may know the weight acting on it, because already there is gravity, you divide that force with mass, you get the acceleration, and subtract that acceleration with gravity, which was already acting on it, you get the extra acceleration caused by the force. So that's how the accelerometer works. A very basic principle: F is equals to ma, nothing more than that. Just that has been made small and compact. Similarly, a gyro, as you may be familiar with the gyroscopic principle. The basic principle says that when a body rotates about one axis, it's try to stabilize in other two axes. So in this figure, you can see there is a disc at the center of this device which is rotating, and there are mounts mounts which has this red color springs attached to it. So when this gyro experiences a force, or and it turns or rotates, the the spring experiences two coupled force. When coupled force are there, it gives rise to a torque. Torque will give you angular acceleration, and from angular acceleration you can determine the angular rate. Sorry, yeah. So this was the basic gyroscope. So what they do is they measure the acceleration and the angular rates. Once you integrate it in a sensor, you will get a position. If you know your initial position, you keep on integrating the acceleration, you will be getting velocity and the position. you keep on adding to your initial position, you get your present position. Similarly, with the angular, with the gyroscope, you get the angular rate. From that, you integrate it, you get the angle at which the vehicle or the object is oriented. So now let's go to the last pillar, that is the control. So when it comes to space launch vehicle and rocket, in space launch vehicle, let's talk about space tech. So there are two basic controls, that is aerodynamic control and thrust vector control. Aerodynamic control is basically it takes the advantage of the dynamic pressure, which is because of the velocity of the air around it, because the vehicle is propelled, it is getting a force, it is moving, and generates lift forces to cause a movement about its center of gravity. You can see here, this is a very schematic and basic diagram which of the uh, reusable launch vehicle which ISRO is developing. So there are two tail surfaces; those are called V tail, and there is wings and there is elevator. So those surface deflect and create moments because of the difference in lift, and that's how the vehicle is controlled. When we go to thrust vector control, which is very much common in a rocket. So this is thrust vector control for the thrust exerted, the thrust developed due to the engine, whether whether a solid rocket or a liquid rocket engine. The thrust is because of the mass flowing out of the rocket engine, the hot gases flowing out of the rocket engine. Once you deflect that flow of that hot gases, you will get a thrust vector, a force vector along it, not along the axis of the rocket, but on an axis that is a little more deflected, and that will cause the moment about the center of gravity. So you can see here a little animation, and here there is a uh, brief explanatory, self-explanatory diagram. The thrust is in the center center rocket. The thrust is acting along the line, so it is there is no moment force generating which is turning or controlling the rocket. And other two cases where the thrust is deflected because of the deflection of the, whether the nozzle or the deflection of the engine. So this is how control is implemented in rockets. So now let's get let's get to the modern space tech, the cutting edge thing which we all are fascinated about, going into Mars, sending things into Mars, colonizing Mars. And here is I show you the picture of the NASA Perseverance rover and how they deployed it into the Mars surface. So basically, there is a capsule at the top which is just separated from the orbiter, gets ejected and propelled into the Mars atmosphere. Once there is an atmospheric entry, there is this heating, there is a shock wave formed, and there is a heating. Then once it comes, once it decelerates up to a sufficient velocity because of the atmosphere that is on Mars, a parachute is deployed to decelerate it even more. Then the heat shield separates and exposes the Mars rover and other equipments, which has a radar and which decides where to land. Does it measures altitude, and then there is a image. Uh, I hope you all can see this. It's visible to all. Yeah, so there is the cameras which are doing the image detection and to land on a specific terrain they wanted to. Then the drone here, which is, we'll call it a drone, it is powered by thrusters, retro thrusters. So when this is that is separated from the capsule, and the retro thrusters are powered to decelerate the uh, descent, because if it hits the ground, it will break certainly. So now, after a certain altitude is reached, the rover is separated from the drone, and the drone releases it and goes away. I wanted to show you this part because I wanted you to believe that space tech, or when you talk about space tech and robotics, it's fascinating, it's cooler, but it's not at all complex, but it is challenging. Suppose it is challenging, it's done with very basic principles. Like I explained you, the sensors which were used in navigation and guidance, they are very basic concepts. Few of them you have studied in 12 standards. But what makes it exciting or feel complex is its interdisciplinary behavior, or the challenging. When it comes to space, it becomes more challenging. So if robotics is cooler, then space tech is thrilling. So just imagine if engineering is an ocean of knowledge, and robotics is a river flowing into that ocean. Then space tech is very very niche. It will just be a canal of that river. But space tech is space tech, or that narrow canal is the stream that gets the most storms, when because it is challenging. Just look at this picture and just imagine it, the heat shield here. We know that when there will be atmosphere in the Mars, and this will fall onto the Mars surface. It will be a free fall when the capsule enters. But just see, there is a aerodynamic hitting because of the shock waves. So the first challenge that will come into your mind is, because of that aerodynamic hitting, what is the temperature it is reaching? Will it cook the inside electronics equipments, which will fail the mission? What material should that heat should be made to protect the equipment inside? It is simple. You will just have to find a material suitable to sustain that temperature, or if not, you'll have to get some idea to protect it. It is usually done with a carbon shield, where it carbon doesn't protects the electronic equipments. It is not a perfect shielding. Rather, we uh, it is usually the heat shield is designed so thick that the heat shield corrodes and protect the equipment. So that's how you'll have to find some material science engineer will be storming their heads to find a material that is suitable enough to protect the inner equipment. Aerodynamics engineer will be doing this aerothermal studies, that how much the temperature the shock wave is reaching. Structural engineers are aerodynamic engineer, both they will be studying what will be the shape of this capsule. Just notice the shape of the nose of the capsule is blunt. It's very 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 blunt, rather than being a pointed one. Why is it not a pointed one? Then design of the parachute on designing parachute on Earth and Mars is different. Same basic concept. You'll have to use the drag to use the parachute and decelerate in Mars as well. Same basic concept, but the challenge here will be what the parachute material should be made of, how much should be the diameter of the parachute, when should it eject. So these all small things, what you will have to know, take care of the temperature there, the wind gust there, the atmosphere there, if there is a dust storm. So these are the things which makes it challenging and more thrilling in space tech. But I tell you, they are made of basic things and very intuitive things. The sensor I showed, those were just force is equal to mass into acceleration. Same Newton's law, gravity everywhere. Same V is equals to Ri everywhere. So whatever you study right now is in engineering is implemented, and challenges are solved. So when we talk about space tech, it takes even more discipline. It has to be done in a very meticulous manner. You'll have to take care of certain things. It's different things. When you do it on the ground, the battery can be of any size you want to power any robot. But when it goes into the air or some space, the battery has to be as small as possible. It has to give the required power, and it has to be less in mass as well. So that's why space is more fascinating. It is thrilling. I hope there are some students who are fascinated about traveling and shorts. So if engineering is traveling and robotics is backpacking, then space tech will be trekking. So that's what we all believe. It is a adventure in itself. When you design it, when you do such work, you will feel that. Why space technology is more important? Because we are taking human race ahead. We are the tech itself. Imagine Galileo and all the astronomers, uh, even Stephen Hawking and all of those people, they doing astronomy, but there is no technology. You will never know. You will never go beyond solar eclipse and lunar eclipse. You will just see uh, stars, moons, galaxy from here with a telescope, but will never go beyond that. You cannot reach Mars. So we are the concept of searching for a alternate place for human being, alternate place to live like Earth, is just because there is space technology. Uh, here there is a picture most of you might have seen, so and might have recognized as well. So this is the picture of the launch of SLV-3 space launch vehicle. This was in 1979, 1980, when ISRO had just started. This was one of the first launch of ISRO space launch vehicle, which was taking the Rohini satellite into lower Earth orbit. So where are we now? So we everybody know that Indian Indians have made significant progress in space tech, and we have proved uh, all over the world that we are behind no other country, and we can do what other we have showcased our tech, that we can also do such impossible or challenging things. It was we should once remember Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, under whose leadership we have come this long way today. And he always talked about failures, learn from failures. So today I thought, instead of going through some successful stories of ISRO, I should first I should mention, many of you might be knowing, but still. So first launch, we launched our first rocket SLV-3 in 1979, August 10. But after the first stage, during the second stage, the rocket fell into Bay of Bengal. And when it was studied why it happened, it just happened because of a faulty valve. There, so there are valves in your day-to-day lives. There are valves in your taps, but we are not concerned about those valves because they play a very limited role. What concerning may happen if the valve of a tap doesn't work? Nothing. The plumber will come and repair. That is no big deal. Still water will be coming, so you can bath. But if small valve in a rocket failing. The small valve will fail and it will take billions of dollars into water. Then in 1993, PSLV vehicle launch. There are multiple, so there were three, uh, th- yeah, there were stages, and it failed because the second stage and third stage firing gap was a little more. The when the second stage, sorry, when the third stage was separating, the time taken by the second stage to start was a little delayed due to some reason, few seconds, and the mission failed. Then there was a failure in 2006 of GSLV when the motor failed. There are motors in. Suppose take the example of that line follow robot. What will happen? Nothing. But when it fails in a rocket, it will take all other things down. So that's how challenging it is. So the risk involved in very small subsystems or sensors failing is very, very huge. That's why it is more challenging and thrilling. Now, one of the greatest success story of ISRO, which is the Mars Orbiter mission. When we did it, when PSLV took our Mars orbiter to Mars, we were the only country who did it at one go in a one shot, and we were in the elite class of space tech all over the world, and we did that only with a budget of 450 crores, that is 74 million. There was a movie Gravity which was released during that time, 2013, which costed $100 million, and our we reached Mars in $74 million, and NASA's Maven orbiter mission was 10 times the cost of ours. So it was a huge success for us, and we are known to use technology in a very efficient way, in a very cheaper way. So we will keep on doing that, and since we Indians have reached to such a level in space tech, why shouldn't we make India a space hub? So that was the idea behind the formation of InSpace by the government of India under Department of Space. So InSpace is uh, it stands for Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center. What it does is it regulates the facility owned by direct Department of Space to promote space tech in private enterprises and other enterprises as well, for the facility, for to use that facility and grow as a technological we for Indians to grow as a technological marvels. So Agnikul is under that umbrella. It is our company which is making a uh, small satellite launch vehicle, and uh, we started in the year 2017, and from the news you may know, we have tested our semi cryogenic engine, which is fully 3D printed single piece engine, and and we are building Agniban rocket, which will take us to the lower Earth orbit. So that is all for today's talk and insights, and I just wanted you to uh, have a little more patience so that we can. Most of you might have seen this video, but just I wanted it to share, and so that we can see this video together and feel it from our hero, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam.
Not audible.
So yeah, so we also believe on his ideologies, and we are as a company, we are as a team progressing, and we also face all the adventures and failures. Uh, you will face challenges when you are working on space tech or robotics, even in life. But what we believe, being wo- working in a space tech, what we believe is we can overcome, and we always can overcome. There are a million things that has to go right in a rocket for the rocket to go to the orbit, but we can make it happen. We can make it happen, and with that ideology, we as a company are progressing. So that will be all, and thank you for being patient. Thank you all. My first question, sir, where did you completed your engineering studies? Okay, like I said, I am also from a usual engineering college in Odisha. It is a private college, among good private college, Gandhi Institute for Technological Advancement. My university was Biju Patnaik University of Technology. I studied BTech from there, and then I moved to MTech from Defense Institute of Advanced Technology, that's in Pune, the only defense university in India. Our embedded systems for spacecraft design and hardware are generally used. Yeah, it's simple. It's the same way you write a code on a microcontroller for your normal robotics. It is the same basic concept you have to write in whether some basic programming language, that is C, C++, and it's the same way, just it's more efficient and less. It takes less computational time. Oh, okay. What are your views about how much the space sector would develop in the upcoming years, about 50 years from now? Yeah, nice question on that. Yeah, like you see, we have means ISRO has already joined the elite space club, and we are progressing on that idea since ISRO has is standing, and it so we can help our country, our nation, in to become a technological marvel in space sector. So now private enterprises are coming up, and because of this formation of in space, now facilities could be used for research and development, and now there is a wind towards more research in space, and I think there is a very bright future for India. uh, as I said, we Indians are known for making space tech more affordable, and it is we are projecting the idea that space tech is simpler and easier. It's not like you'll have to uh, put so many billions into it. It can be done in a simple way as well. So we are right on the track. We will be at a good position when we okay. uh, I'm a class 12th and I wish to pursue a career in aerospace engineering. Any suggestions for students like me? Yeah, man. Sure, sure. Nice that you attended this talk. So, yeah, for 12 students, as I said, robotics and aerospace and none of the field is complicated. It looks complex because of the number of things and challenges, but it's just those basic concepts which you learn in 11th and 12th, and that those will be applied. So just believe in the study and be more curious and learn new things and try to relate it with the basic things you learn in the class, so that will help. Whatever, not only aerospace engineering, whatever engineering field you choose, you will excel in that. Just try to relate everything with your basics and how that is implemented. So line follower robot, autonomous or manual? It is a autonomous robot, dude. It uses that IR sensor I showed you to be on the track as a. It uses that as a guidance system. I didn't know that was the guidance system for my robot, but yeah, that is the guidance system, and it is autonomous. Just you have to power it. How significant would robotics in the field of space tech in the future? It is already there. It is already robotics is already there. I showed you the Mars Perseverance rover landing. So that is robotics. That is a autonomous robot they deployed on Mars. Now they have flew the Ingenuity rover helicopter in Mars. So already there is robotics in space tech, and in future, yeah, uh, like means we don't know now, but as the imagination goes, and you must have watched movies, yeah, there will be robots and space robotics will help you get to other planet and do some odd jobs like drilling. Suppose you want to drill in the Mars, so you need to send a armadillo there, a robotic armadillo, and start drilling. So those kind of things will happen in the future. uh, Sir, what did it really push you to choose BT? What is a BTech? uh okay. It's funny story. Actually, I didn't want to pursue BTech. Actually, I wanted to go for uh, physics honors, then MSc in physics, then PhD in physics. Like you guys, I was inspired by Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, and I wanted to be a scientist. Just I don't know why I didn't want to be an engineer. Somehow I entered engineering, but I find this uh, more exciting than science. So yeah, that's how I came into BTech. What are the exams for aerospace? Uh, for exams for aerospace, you need to enroll for a BTech in aerospace. Even if, like, I didn't started with a BTech aerospace. I was in my BTech, it was electrical and electronics engineering. In my MTech, it became aerospace, where my specialization was in guided missiles. with a specific area of guidance, navigation, and control. So you can take admission in aerospace, but whatever field you choose in your BTech, it's just the application that counts. Now I am using my electrical and electronics knowledge. There is a paper called control system in aerospace. So you can aerospace is a very diverse field. Means it's broad. The application is broad. You can be aerospace engineer. What is the scope of instrumentation in this sector? Yeah, instrumentation has means there is really good scope, because robotics can be limited if there are no invention of sensors, and there is no strong control. So instrumentation field will develop more sensors and instrumentation, other instrumentation, electronics, and they will do the they are with along with control. They will yeah, there is a scope since technology is expanding in India. Sir, can you give intro about Iron Dome of Israel? Yeah, that you saw. Yeah, Iron Dome. Iron Dome is a. It is not a dome. It is virtual dome. The image. Wait. Let me share you. Uh, the photo I shared you in this PPT. The guidance and control. It is just that, and the radar detects the rockets from militants, and it sends uh, tactical missiles, and those tactical missiles are having homing guidance, and they just kill the target, and that is what homing guidance. But that takes place in a very fast rate, where multiple missiles are launched. So it is simple with that, the same homing guidance concept. Okay, sir, more about your company and its objective. Uh, the objective is pretty quite clear. We are niche. We are touching right now a niche area of space, where we are willing to launch small satellites into lower Earth orbit, and you will be. That is the first objective. We are building the Agniban rocket now, which is 2 stages. How to pursue robotics? What's the risk? What the right tracks are? Robotics is a MTech specialization. You can pursue robotics in your masters as a specialization. Even though you don't study in masters, believe me, you take any BTech and then pursue a career in robotics, that will land you in good robotics. Just be very clear about BTech. There is no right or wrong track. A person can remain in robotics some way or the other, by choosing a career path at the beginning, or taking a master and then choosing the career path in robotics. So there is no right or wrong track. What is the good microcontroller of robot, like Arduino? In industrial side, can we use Arduino like controllers? Arduino is a very basic microcontroller, where they have pre-built libraries in it to help you program it. So like when I made my line follower, when I was being BTech, I used as I said, I used Arduino, because it had libraries. I wasn't familiar with embedded system then, microprocessor, microcontroller programming. I was not uh, acquainted of in my second year. So Arduino has libraries. Yeah, there are microcontrollers which do not come with libraries, have more better processing speed, and have better memories, and you can use them to code from very scratch. And you'll have to they will have to be coded with C rather than in Arduino IDE. Which institution is best for robotics in India? Uh, just a heads up, brother. Like there is no good what I believe. Yeah, certainly IITs, NITs are good institutions. You get more exposure. But let me tell you my thing. I am not from a IIT or NIT. I didn't know here I will be. I just wanted to work in a more technological domain and wanted to pursue become a scientist, which still I feel I haven't yet. I have still long way to go. You uh, you can write exams, you can become a robotics, even though you are from a normal field. That's what I was telling in the initial part of my talk, that we are all the same. Just be confident that it is the same engineering which you learn here, there, or anywhere. What you study in a normal college is force is equal to mass into acceleration. What you study in normal college is velocity is equals to resistance into current. That is same in America as well, or in any IIT, NIT. Once you are very, very clear in your basics, yeah, uh, you might means you might be feeling down because maybe your aspiration might be high to go land into, and it is always okay. But even if you land in a institution, but if until and unless they teach engineering, you are fine with that. So just believe in the basics and be clear with the basics, and this is the basic principle and nothing more complex. Should we go for MTech after BTech instrumentation technology to have a good space career? If so, no, not necessarily. MTech is a higher studies, it gives you a more specialization, but as I said, there are multiple paths to a same destination. And my I have colleagues who are BTechs, just BTechs, and they are working with me and they are doing a great job. So it's not always necessary to go for MTech. You can do it after having a career in space sector as well. So it's up to you, man. It's both way okay. Just you will have to do good. How to enter ISRO? Yeah, ISRO has two way of uh, recruitment. One is through exams. One is no three actually: lateral entry, exams, and through campus placement. There is an institute called Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology that directly comes under ISRO. So there is an exam for it to enter IIST. They teach their BTech there, and ISRO does a campus placement, and few in and also in few of the IITs it does campus placement there as well. And for BTech graduates, ISRO has its own exam which you can write, qualify, then you will be called. If you are shortlisted, if you are among the top 100 200 rank uh, in India in your branch of study, you will be called for an interview, qualify the interview, and enter. And there is lateral entry as well for experienced people in research, uh, who are project associate, project assistant, who have a certain research field that goes as close to ISRO. You can enter ISRO as well, but so that is even if so that's the three type. Sir, for a CSE student, what roadmap you would suggest enter into set? Yeah, for computer science is also like space tech is not just one stream, dear friend. It is a combination. It is very much interdisciplinary. We want CSE, mechanical, electrical, electronics, material science, every field. So you can. There is no roadmap again. You need to choose a career path with such companies, or which are more into tech, and they are not making the domain you have to choose in your career path. You will just have to code technological stuffs like robotics coding, and you will have to be good at embedded system and other software development. So um, they are requirement of software engineers, CSE engineers, and space tech. It is open. Does Agnikul Cosmos provide internship for students in instrumentation stream? Yeah, means you can means I don't know, but yeah, you can apply. You can always apply. Yes, if you are shortlisted, yes, you can apply. It is open. You can apply through the website, and If you are shortlisted, you will be called for. Yeah, there are many microcontrollers you take for Raspberry Pi. It is a microprocessor though, which has a lesser memory, more powerful processor. You can code it. You can code microprocessor instead of going for a microcontroller, which are limited in function and computers. The computation capability is very application specific and very lesser. So you can go for microprocessor like Raspberry Pi, and you can code it. There is an XP processor. There are many. Thank you, sir. Sir, what the admission process institution like IIST or IIA? There are exams related to these institutions, so you can find it on the internet. So yeah, people. So I think those were all the questions. So yeah, it was nice. Those were really good questions, and I think more of, since you are most of those, it seems like most of you are students and worried about your career. So don't need to worry too much. Just enjoy the engineering. We are a lucky bunch to read engineering. So yeah, thank you. Mahima Sweta wants to speak. Yeah,
Yes, sir.
you are raising a
So
hand. Yeah,
I have a question. So my question
yes.
is how to start with control systems. It would be great if you could share your experience on how you started it.
Yeah. Look, okay. Like I told you the story of line follower, right? I was an electronic student, and control system is a paper in the semester exam itself. So I was studying it as like a normal control system. It's stability, Nyquist plot, Bode plot, this, that, performance, time domain specification, frequency domain specification. I was just studying for the hack of it, and not knowing much of its application in a real domain or practical domain. Then when I joined that robotics club, and I started doing robotics, that was my first experience which I shared. That's why I thought it will be a very much nice thing to share with you people. I used PID controller there. I found somewhere, I don't remember now. I found somewhere where they had used PID controller. They used coding using PID controller to improve the performance of a line follower robot. So I used that program. I understood that we tuned the gains. Are you electrical student Mahima?
Yes, sir. I'm pursuing mechatronics sections.
Oh, okay, so you are in first year or second year?
First, yes.
Okay, you'll get. I think you will be now studying just electronics, basic electronics. So maybe in second year you will be introduced to control systems. So yeah, so when you there is PID controller, it is the very basic among the controller in control systems. When you start studying control system design, this is the most basic controller used, and it is used till date. What means most of the the challenging complex, whatever you call the systems, PID controller is a controller which you cannot say no to. They are used. Okay, so that PID controller was my first that developed my interest in control system, and there I felt like control. There is so much more to control system. Control system is, when you say system, it is not a laptop or not a thing. It can be anything. Then I got to know what system means. Like it is a door. You have seen those doors, like right in a AC room, where it when you open it, it closes automatically because there is a spring in the hinge of the door. Control system goes to as basic as that system. That do you can just represent the transfer function of the door, and transfer function is this decided using the input and output of a system. You just check the behavior, and then there is a transfer function. Then by designing a controller means what you will have to do as a control system engineer, that you will have to design a spring constant. I think you are familiar with spring constant from 12th, right? So you will have to find out a value of spring constant which will help, which you will buy for you, which the spring you will look for. Using control system, you find out the spring constant, then look for a spring which is the same spring constant like that, and use that. Then the door will behave according to you. If you wanted the door to shut faster, it will shut faster. If you want it to be slower, it will be slower. So control system takes to very basics of that. Even the door has control system. So the suspension system of car, it is also a spring that uses control system. You will have to design the spring again. So yeah, that's how the control system started with me. That I got interested with line follower. Yeah. Yeah, Anusha, you want question? Mahima, did
Yes,
that
sir. Hi, sir.
doubt? Uh, Sorry, Anusha, I had to interrupt you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Anusha. Yeah, tell me.
Yes, sir. Can you please explain about the state space
Sorry.
modeling, sir?
Okay, state space modeling. Yeah, it is a challenge. Means I also struggled. I didn't understand it in BTech. I understood it later on. Okay, so take let's take an example of that boat example. You remember from the PPT?
Yes, sir.
You can unmute. I will be interacting with you between your answer. Yeah. So in that boat example, like I said, no, I said there is navigation, right? So you will control that boat only if you know the position, velocity of that boat. You know the destination, unless and until you know your position right now, your velocity right now, you cannot control the boat, right? So these state these are the states of a system. To control a system, you need to know what the system, what are the outputs, or what are the potential outputs. Like for that boat, you want to control what? You want to deflect your row while the paddle while rowing. So how much will you deflect? you, to know that, you will be interested in the output of the system. What are the outputs which I am looking at? Those outputs are the states are the parameter which has the potential to become output. Suppose you want to control the velocity of the boat, you will sense the velocity. Even in a autopilot car, right? Auto driving car where autopilot there, if you want to control the velocity of the car, you will see the velocity. You will be interested in the velocity output of the car, and the sensor will sense it, and accordingly the control input, the input to the system will be given. So velocity here is an output, but what are the states that couldn't become output? Those are the position of the car. Yes, you can see position as a output. Sometime if you are parking at that, during that time you will see the position as a output rather than velocity, right? The position of the car is more important. Knowing the position of the orientation of the car, angle at which it is inclined to the parking lot, is the output you are more interested in. So these are the states which has the potential to become output, are called the state. And state space, when you say state space, it is a it is used to represent multiple output and multiple input system. So when there are multiple output, like for this example, there is velocity, there is position, there is angle of the car. And in control as a control input, there are brakes, the brake input, the deflection in the brake, the deflection in the accelerator pedal. So these are two inputs. So those cannot be represented just with one transfer function. The basic if you see the definition of basic transfer function, it is just meant, it is just the ratio of output to input in Laplace domain. It doesn't talk about multiple input, multiple output. So state space was formed to represent a multiple output, multiple input system. And then we started calling them states, because all at a given point of time, it is not everything you are monitoring. You are monitoring only one state, which we call as output. So that is what is state space is about. to make things more simpler for multiple output, multiple input system. I hope that is clear, Anushya.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Sir, I have a question.
Sorry.
So the PID can handle like only linear inputs, like it's a linear time it can handle only linear time invariant systems.
Yes.
So most of the real life models we have are usually non-linear stuff. So how do we handle them?
Okay. You are can you please introduce us, since this is a nice question?
Yeah, I'm Sai Shankaran, sir.
No, you are a BTech engineering student or you are a professional?
No, I'm a student.
Okay. Yeah. When we are taught in BTech, that is linear time invariant system. Yes, PID is a classical controller and can be used in linear system. Yeah. In practically, brother, there is no linear system. If you see to very depth of any system, no, none of the system is linear. Ideally, right? All are non-linear. How the control system, okay, there, how the linear control system is implemented is like they are all non-linear system which are linearized in the sense they are reduced to a linear system. They are reduced to a linear system and then checked. Then the linear controllers are implemented. So when they are transformed from non-linear to linear, what needs to be kept in mind is whether linearizing the non-linear system is making a very great change in the dynamics or not, whether we are capturing all the dynamics even when it is linear. Means, because if there is a non-linear system and if you start neglecting stuff to make in linearize, there is a chance that you may miss the important dynamics of the system. So that is taken care of. And one more thing that is taken into account is the error. If you are reducing a non-linear system to a linear system, if the error between the non-linear and linear are acceptable, means making it linear doesn't mess with the system dynamics, and the outputs are very much predictable, because if a system goes out of hand while controlling, that means there are unpredictable outputs. That's it. The stability you study, no, that is unpredictable output. So it is checked whether linearizing that system is still giving the predictable output. If that is there, then you can linearize the system and again implement the same linear controllers, PID. There are many linear controllers which you will study in the later stage. LQR, linear quadratic regulator, and so those are the linear controllers. And when it comes to real non-linear control system where you cannot linearize it, yes, there are non-linear controllers as well. You do non-linear analysis like phase plane analysis. You use a non-linear and robust controller like input-output feedback linearization, that is kind of a controller. Then adaptive control, sliding mode controls, backstepping is there. Backstepping controllers are there. So there are many non-linear controls, so those will be implemented. But in most of the system, it's always linear. It is linearized, and means there are almost so many systems which are linearized and always used in linear domain. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you.